This is lesson 39, part 2. So we're going to continue with more examples, and I'm just going to keep stressing that it is very important that you show your work on these problems. There are very many places, that doesn't sound right. There are a lot of places that you can make mistakes, little mistakes, with variables and exponents, and it's very, very, very important that you show your steps and show your work so that you can go back if you make a mistake and find your mistake. Okay, so for our next example, we're going to distribute the numerator. So we have an f and an f, which will be f squared. And we have a g squared and a g, which will be g to the third power. And then there's also an x in there. Moving on to the next term, it's just a 4, and then the variables that we started with, f, g squared. And then the last term here, we have a 2. We have a g for our g squared, but no f's, so the f is going to stay f squared, or I'm sorry, just f. And then we have g and g squared, which is g cubed, and then an extra x there. Now we'll go back and look at the denominators. So we have h times h for the first one, which is h squared. And then h times h squared for the next one, which is h cubed. And then nothing on the bottom of this one, so it's just a 1 times h, which is h. Okay, moving on to our next step. We're going to look and see if there's any negative exponents, which there is not. And then the next step is to look for anything that can cancel. So in the first term, f, g, and x, there's nothing to cancel with h's. In the second one, there's nothing to cancel with h's on the top. And the third one, there's nothing to cancel with h's on the top. So we're lucky, and we're done with this one. All we have to do is list the excluded values, which h is the only variable listed in the denominator in our final answer and in the original. So h is the only one that is excluded and cannot be 0. And that's our final answer for that problem. Pretty simple. Moving on to the next problem. Let's go ahead and distribute the numerators. So we have m and m to the negative second power. Now remember, that's 1 for the first m plus a negative 2 for m to the negative second power. We add the exponents. So 1 plus negative 2 is m to the negative 1 power. Then we have the n's. So we have n to the negative 4th and n to the first power. So again, that's negative 4 plus 1. So that's going to be n plus to the negative 3rd power. And then we also have an r in here. So we have to tack that on. We're done with the numerator of the first term. Okay, for the second one, there aren't any m's to add to this one, so it's just the m. N's, we have negative 4 plus 4, which is going to be 0. So that's going to cancel out the n's. There aren't any n's left. And then we also have an r to the negative second power. And then the last term here, we have plus sign and 8. We have an m and an m, so that's m squared. And then we also have the n to the 4th power from the original. Okay, so we're done with numerators. Let's move on to denominators. We have p to the negative second power plus or times p to the 3rd power. So again, that's negative 2 plus 1 plus 3, I'm sorry, lost my spot here. So negative 2 plus 3 equals positive 1, so that's just p. And then the next term is over a 1, so that would just be p to the negative second power times 1, which is p to the negative second power. And then the last one, p to the negative second power times p to the first power, so again that's negative 2 plus 1, which equals negative 1. So that would be p to the negative 1 power. Okay, so our next step is to get rid of those negative exponents. So we can circle all the negatives that need to be flipped. There's quite a few here. So I'm going to write this underneath this time. So left on the top of my first term is just going to be r. And left on the bottom will be p. And then I'm moving the m to the first power to the bottom and n to the third power to the bottom. Remember, that gets rid of the negative. Just changes it to a positive exponent. In the next term, I have an m left on the top, and I'm moving the r to the negative second power to the bottom, and I'm moving the p to the second power to the top. So they've switched. Okay, in the last one, I have an 8 and an m squared that are staying the same. And then n to the fourth is moving to the bottom, and p to the first power is moving to the top. Okay, now I can go back and see if there's anything to cancel. And I don't see any variables in common in the numerator and denominator in the first one, or the second one, or the third one. So we are all set with that one. There's nothing more to simplify. We just have to list the excluded values. So I'm looking at a p, m, and n in the first one, and then an r in the second one. And going back to the original, it's all p's, which we've already listed. So it's these four that are excluded. That's our final answer for that one. Moving on to the last example. A triangular section of a building is an area represented by this expression. Simplify the expression. So we're simplifying, which means distributing and making it, getting rid of the inclusion symbols or parentheses. So the first one, numerator, we have an r to the fourth and an f, which there's no other f's there, and then a q and an r to the negative 1 power. Now I can go back here and combine my r to the fourth and r to the negative 1. So 4 plus negative 1 is going to be 3. So we're going to change this to r to the third power. Okay, and then in the next term, we have a 6 and a t cubed and a q, and then we have our r to the fourth and f as well. So that's a lot of variables. Okay, and then the denominators, we have 2 and then f to the negative 2 power and t. And then in the last one here, we have a 2 and an r to the negative 1 power and f to the 6th power. Okay, so now our next step again is to go back and find our negative exponents. So we have f to the negative 2nd power and r to the negative 1 power. So we're going to move those. So on the top, everything's staying the same in the first fraction. So r cubed, f, q. And on the bottom, we have 2 and t left. And then the f squared is moving to the top. So I'm just going to add it on to the top. And then in the next fraction, again, everything on the top is staying. So I'm just going to copy it down. 6 t cubed q r to the fourth f. And on the bottom, we're keeping 2 and f to the 6th power. But this r is going to be moving to the top, r to the 1st power. Okay, now I can go back and see if there's anything to combine. And in the first fraction, I have an f and an f squared. So that I'm going to rewrite as r cubed f cubed, because f squared times an f is f cubed, and then q, and on the bottom I have 2t. And in the second one, I have an r and an r to the 4th power. So I can rewrite this one, 6t cubed q, and then the r's, there's 5 of them now, and then an f. And on the bottom we have 2f to the 6th power. Okay, now I can go back to my new equations here and see if there's anything to cancel from the top to the bottom of the fraction. So in the first one, there's nothing to cancel with the 2 on the top, and there's also nothing to cancel with the t. There aren't any other t's in the numerator. In the second term, the 2 and the 6 can be combined and simplified, and also the f's. So we're going to rewrite the first term here, r cubed, f cubed, q, over 2t. And then our second term is going to be minus 6 divided by 2 is 3, so that's going to leave a 3 on the top and just a 1 on the bottom. And then the t cubed is staying the same, the q and the r to the 5th. And then the f's, this one f is going to cancel out, and it's going to make this f to the 5th power on the bottom. So we'll have 3t cubed q r to the 5th over f to the 5th power. And that's our final equation there, so we have to find our excluded values. There's a t and an f in our denominators and our answer here. And if we go back to the original, there's also an r in the denominator for the original. So we have to list that as an excluded value as well. And that's our final answer for that one, simplified version. Okay, thank you for listening and taking notes.